Greetings, YouTube. Last Sunday, in Steubenville, Ohio, 2 boys were found guilty of rape. Ages 16 and 17, they were sentenced to 1 year in one case and 2 years in another. That's it. They'll serve this very short sentence in a juvenile facility, and then they'll move on with their lives. The survivor in this particular case was a 16-year-old girl who was so drunk that people at the party referred to her as the dead girl. And these 2 rapists gang raped her, repeatedly assaulting her with a room full of witnesses. They kept betting each other, anteing up money to see which one would take a urination on her. One person spoke up about this, but was shouted down. Unfortunately, sometimes crowds can have that effect. He backed down. And he was still the bravest person in that room, because he at least said something. Everyone else took pictures and videos and tweeted about it, and then disseminated those pictures and videos on the internet of 2 boys raping a 16-year-old girl repeatedly. There are times when humanity is very, very ugly, and this is one of them. But worse than this has been the reaction of the mainstream media, which I'm told repeatedly by conservatives is liberally biased. And their reaction has been to feel sympathy for the rapists. Yes, the rapists. Not only that, but some of those agencies released the name of the 16-year-old survivor, who is now getting death threats. Way to go, mainstream media. Stay classy. Show us all about your journalistic integrity. Go ahead, show us. I'd love to see it. You certainly aren't showing it here. This is ugly. This is almost as ugly as it gets. And people on the internet are backing up the rapists. I'm going to link to an article that deals with some of the tweets that have been collected about this particular case. And it's horrifying what people are saying about this. Now, in my life, I have repeatedly heard a phrase. I've even used it myself, though thankfully never in this particular instance. And that phrase is, silence implies consent. Except, that statement's wrong. There can never be an implication of consent. Consent must be explicit. Consent must involve acknowledgement, confirmation, a distinct, clear, and absolute yes. And if there is not a distinct and clear and absolute yes, then it's no. Flat out. And you can't get an explicit form of consent if one of the parties is drunk, or high, or unconscious. Say, so unconscious that people are referring to them as the dead girl. It must be explicit. There can never be an implication of consent. Because even if the person is awake and uninebriated, if they are silent, that doesn't mean that they're giving consent. Because sometimes terror can make the best of us mute. This is ugly, folks. This is horrifying. And we need to make sure that everyone knows that unless you give explicit consent, nothing goes. And do you know who's to blame for this particular case right here in this Steubenville, Ohio case? the rapists are to blame for it. Not the survivor. Nope. Doesn't matter if she was drunk or not. Doesn't matter how she dressed. Doesn't matter anything. Doesn't matter if she dated either of these guys. Doesn't matter if she'd had sex with an entire football team. What matters is she did not give explicit consent. And these two boys raped her. And they got the legal equivalent of a slap on the wrist. And that's sickening. Because in a couple of years, they're going to move on. Now, people seem to be all upset because they've thrown away their football careers. I apologize for the following, but this is what they can do with their football careers. This court didn't throw away their future. This survivor of this horrific attack didn't throw away their future. These boys threw away their future. They tossed it out the friggin' door when they decided to become rapists. This wasn't an accident. You turn a corner a little too quick, you bump into someone's bumper, that's an accident. Somebody breaks the coffee pot while they're doing dishes, that's an accident. When you deliberately rape someone, film it, and disseminate that film, that's not an accident. These two jokers are rapists. Plain and simple. And they've ruined someone's life. And then mainstream media has decided to pig pile on top of it and see if they can make her life a little worse. And then, of course, the internet has decided to up the ante and crank it all the way up to 11 and blame the survivor and give sympathy to the rapists. It's, I want to say it's astounding. But it isn't.